cut spending in all other parts of the House of Representatives. I can't control the Senate, but my committee does have responsibility there. So we have worked with the Library of Congress where we're going to take some significant cuts. We have worked for all areas. Now, one we did not cut, but we kept it at current levels, is the Capitol Police. In light of what happened with Gabby Gifford and some other things, it did not appear to be an appropriate thing to do, and frankly, I would have fought against cuts in that regard. Having said that, we are reviewing every contract that the House of Representatives has. We have rejected some contracts, in fact, rejected some renewals of contracts because we're trying to save money in every operation that the House of Representatives has. Now, that's my piece of the pie with my committee. So I think you're going to see some very serious spending reductions in different federal government agencies and departments. Now, whether that results in a loss of staff or whether it's taken through attrition so that people are not replaced, I don't know. But I think you're going to see real numbers out there for the very first time. One of the things that we argued both in terms of the continuing resolution and since that time is that we ought to be using, if there's a baseline, it ought to be the pre-stimulus, pre-TARP baseline. What I mean by that is, normally as you begin to look for future years, you start with what the baseline is now, what's your spending level right now. With TARP and with stimulus, you ramped up the spending, but it was supposed to be for an immediate program, right? Well, you would think if you're doing that, since that was the emergency spending, after you finish the programs, you go down to the baseline to where you were. The argument was, no, we ramped up here for these, and this should be our baseline. So that's been another argument we've made. Did the baseline, should we start from up here, or should we start from here, which is just where we were 2 years ago? So we've been trying to do that. If you look at a lot of the infighting, if you will, has been over that. What are the numbers that you start with? And so we've been trying to say, since baseline budgeting, since if you spend now the way the government works, that's sort of where you start. We want to reduce where we start from. And then that has implications for year after year after year. So when people call my office and say, you know, compromise, one of the first things I ask them is, what do you want me to compromise? Well, I don't know, but just compromise. Well, part of the difference of opinion was, where do you start? Spending up here, spending there. Do you start spending cuts today, or do you do it 2 or 3 years from now? Those have tremendous implications. So to say a compromise over what? I mean, is it principle? I don't compromise on principle. I mean, if it's practical application, but let's at least know what the consequences are. In the back. Oh, right in front of you, right?
Thank you. In your last town hall meeting in Rancho Cordova a couple of months ago, somebody raised the issue of subsidies that are being paid to the oil companies from our tax money. And you justified that on the basis that the oil companies would take that and spend it for exploration and that sort of thing, and that it would go to their stockholders, which was a bunch of pension funds.
I said the largest single ownership block of oil and gas in America are the private and public pension funds.
Yes, yes, that's right. Anyway, I have a degree in accounting, and the net profits which the oil companies are making are setting records, and that's after they pay for all their expenses. That's after they pay for their exploration and production. That's after they pay for their political contributions to members of Congress and the President, and that sort of thing.
Well, if they make any contributions to members of Congress or the President, they've committed a felony and they'll go to prison. Corporations cannot make contributions.
Well, under Citizens United. Anyway, all right, the point I'm making, though, I don't see any justification for having our tax dollars. We're paying almost $4 a gallon for gasoline. We were paying that at that point. I do not see any justification for taking our tax dollars and giving that to the oil companies. They're already making it.
No billionaire left behind.
Well, you probably somebody support a bill that I'm on, which would allow a new line on tax returns, which says, in addition to the taxes I'm required to pay, here's what I voluntarily pay. Because I want Warren Buffett, if he really means what he says, to give up as much of what he is as I want. My point is that if there's special subsidies given to oil and gas companies, I certainly would like to reduce those. If you're talking about depreciation allowance, that goes to the question of whether or not you view a commodity, that which is oil, when it is drawn out of the ground as a depletion of the available oil to that company for the future, and whether or not to encourage a continued exploration and production of oil, petroleum products and oil. So, first of all, I would say that.
And so you need to be able to say, justify the subsidy. If that's good for restoration, if we're going for jobs, I think we all be behind you right now and say, yes, you're absolutely right.
First of all, you can show me they're not paying their taxes. I will be happy to lead an effort to ensure that they are paying their taxes, their corporate rates. First of all, you've talked to me. Secondly, I don't know, I was, maybe I come from a different place. I was told by my parents to be respectful of others and allow them to have their say and not shout them down. But evidently, some believe that be rude is the way to get your point across. I'll be happy to take your questions, but if people want to just shout, you know, I can go home and turn the television on and hear something that's shouting at me. Now, I've got grandchildren that I try and teach to be polite. Luckily, my granddaughter went back to be with her parents last week and hasn't had the chance to see. Let me just say this. As far as I know, the oil companies and other corporations are paying their taxes. If they're not paying their taxes, then they ought to be, civil action ought to be taken against them, and criminal action ought to be taken against them. So if anybody has any evidence they're not following the law, I'd be happy to look at it. There has been a lot of talk about the profits they make, not very much about the taxes they pay. I believe they are paying record taxes right now, but that's not the point. Number one, the largest single private employer in California is Chevron. The largest single creator of jobs in California is Chevron. I happen to think that's a good thing, number one. Number two, I happen to be one of those who wants to promote greater exploration and production of our own natural resources. And I would open up more of that for the states. And I would require the oil companies to pay substantial royalties off those lands that would go not only to the federal government, but to the states involved. And if we had some offshore drilling in California, for instance, and royalties paid by the state of California, we would have substantial contributions to reduce our deficit here in California. So I happen to support that. In terms of the overall question of taxes, both corporate and individual, I have on the record been in support, someone I think is leaning to get, yes. I have been on the record in support for some time of eliminating a number of deductions, of tax credits, what people call loopholes, so long as we reduce the overall rates, both individual and corporate, to make us a fairer, more efficient tax system so that we will actually have an economy that works better, creates more jobs, and I think treats people more fairly. So I am on the record for us looking at every single deduction, every single tax credit, every single, some people call it distortion of the tax system, including those that would be available to oil companies and anybody else. Sir. Yes, sir.
Has any mention been made in Congress about a flat tax where everybody pays the tax, like say 13 or 15%, where there's no deductions, and it's equitable for everybody that way? Has this been brought up recently?
I'm not sure whether the Ways and Means Committee has held hearings on it recently, but it has been something under discussion. In the meantime, the Ways and Means Committee has held hearings and is looking at virtually all of, well, some of the largest deductions that affect the corporate tax code right now, with the idea for the elimination of a number of them and bringing the rates down. It wouldn't be an absolute flat tax, but it would be trying to bring the rates down and broadening the base. Look, again, if I ruled the world, which the Constitution doesn't allow, I would move to a flat tax as best we could do that. I mean, you have to do certain things with it. For those people at the lowest income, you have to have a subsistence deduction or a subsistence amount, so that in fact they're able to take care of themselves. But given that, I'd love to see it. The question is, what would be the level if you had a flat tax? I mean, at what percentage? And there's a lot of argument about where you would end up on it at what percentage. Frankly, if I could do the whole thing over, I'd get rid of the income tax altogether. I'd move to a consumption-based tax, because the rich consume more than the rest of us. They pay more than the rest of us. You could have a subsistence return, which credits everybody with that which is required for subsistence. In other words, assist those people at the lowest level of the spectrum. That's the way I do it. I think we have to have some fundamental reform. And I think we could make our economy move a lot better, and we could be far more competitive in the world if we had a simplified tax program that reduced overall rates by getting rid of a lot of the deductions and incentives that are put in. I'll tell you the one that I would get rid of tomorrow: the corn ethanol subsidy and tax I just read something yesterday which suggests for the very first time there's more corn being used in the United States for ethanol than for feeding livestock. I've had a visit from people at Taco Bell who came to me, and I'm part of all other restaurants, to say the corn ethanol has driven up the cost of meat to them, precisely because corn is utilized as a feedstock for livestock. In addition, corn is a staple of diet for people around the world. And we are driving the cost up by a stupid idea that we can produce corn ethanol that makes sense from an energy standpoint, and it doesn't. And I just happen to think that's one of the dumb things we do. It's worth several $billions a year, and I'd get rid of it tomorrow. All right, yes, sir.
I'll start off with two things. Number one, by saying that I probably disagree with you on most things, but then I'll follow that compliment. In that, with all of the discussions that have occurred over the past month in terms of the budget and the debt ceiling, that your own personal rhetoric that gets reported in the news, in the newspapers, is always very civil and accurate. Fortunately, that's not always the standard. Thank you for that.
However,
I think that some of the analogies to the federal budget to a private family budget are a little bit simplified if you understand the essence of macroeconomics. And I think that we are where we are with a large deficit because we have not been paying our way effectively as a nation for the things that we have demanded and received. And that there should be an element of shared sacrifice. And that